Hi there, it's Suzanne Vertonen here from DiscoverChange, and I'm here with Jane Hooper from Jane Hooper Coaching. Hi Jane, how are you?
Hello.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining Leading Conversations today. Now, Jane here is a science-based coach, and she's going to be sharing with us a lot of different techniques and strategies to reprogram your mind. So it's going to be a really, really exciting session. Jane's got a background in corporate leadership, and Jane will be sharing a lot more about her background as well, and how to really become more effective and successful in that area. So Jane, thank you so much for taking part today. It's really, really lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Now, just to get started with, could you just give in your own words, what is it exactly that you do and how did you get started in this field?
Okay. So what do I do? It says on the can I'm a coach, but actually it's a lot more than that. I'd like to think, well, I know that I actually help successful people become actually more successful by utilising their biggest asset, the underutilised asset, their brain. So it's all very much science based on the brain and how I'd like to say I think of your brain as a computer. So if we can reprogram a computer, why can't we reprogram your brain? So I work on those principles to remove bad data that serves you no purpose, install a new operating system, the programs that serve you well, virus protection, and press restart. So whatever goals you have, you're programmed to achieve them easily and effortlessly. So that's really what I do. It doesn't matter which area you're in, what you're looking in terms to achieve, but all of us carry limiting beliefs and have bad data and aren't running the most effective programs. So let's unravel that, look at your symptoms, deal with the root cause, and press restart on a new version of you, so version 2.0. How I got here. So I spent most of my life in the corporate world, actually spent most of it with one organisation, had a very successful career, and I got to a position that I only ever dreamt and aspired to. So I was a senior leader, a director within a FTSE 100.
Fantastic.
And when I left, if you'd asked anybody what they remembered me for, none of them would have remembered me for the programs I led or the fantastic customer results or any of the operational performance. They all remembered me for how I was with people, my team, my virtual team, how I always invested and believed that empowering your teams, you would succeed. So that really resonated with me when I left. And I was a bit stuck in terms of what I wanted to do. And for those of you who take the opportunity to have a look at my website, you'll see there's a very open video that was done a year after I left, when I openly shared about how, because I didn't leave under the best of terms, I reflected, because I went through a period of great uncertainty, had a lot of very negative emotions about what had happened. And it was only when I actually utilised a lot of the techniques that I share now in my coaching, I was able to reprogram the parts of my computer, the bad data, and actually move on and think, well, what am I going to do? And I say to people that if I'd known then what I know now, I would have been more successful, quicker, and more importantly, I would have been so much happier. So that was instrumental in me actually thinking, knowing what I wanted to do. I wanted to share that with people in a similar position to me, so they didn't have to wait until they'd gone through less good things to actually realise what they should know. I want to share that with them now. So I started from that point and literally finished my training, continued evolving my techniques, and have just coached from that point and still continue to coach.
Oh wow, what an amazing journey. Thank you for sharing that. And I've seen so many inspiring things that you do and heard, and also seen a lot of reviews from your customers really saying what a transformational journey it has been to work with you. So you have definitely been an inspiration to me and so many others. And it comes across really that you love what you do. just the way you describe it, but in general, the heart and soul you've put into also becoming really competent in that area and using so many different techniques and tools. And we're going to share about that in a moment. I just noticed that you've got a cat there. As I understand, you've got a lot of cats, don't you? Just on a side note, you've got about, how many cats is it?
Oh, crumbs. So yes, I rescue cats. So I have my own cats. I have 25 now that are mine. They're all
Wow.
the OAPs that people have thrown out because they were too old and unwell, the special needs, the cruelty. So I have the ones that people turn their back on. And so I'm very fortunate. And having my own business is one of those great things because I can actually focus on rescuing them as well, and I foster as well. So there's only one in the background at the moment. She's a foster. But yes, I love rescuing, not just cats, dogs, anything. So,
wow, you have dogs as well?
yes, I have 4 dogs as well.
Wow, wow, that is, you must have quite a lot of space then around your house, I hope. Wow, that is amazing. And I love the fact that you're giving a home to cats and fostering them from any. How long have you been doing that for? And have you always had this love for animals?
Yes, I've always rescued animals from when I was a child all the way through, so I've always done it. I've really took off when I left the corporate world, so about 3 years ago. Although I had the cats, that was when I was able to take on board the ones that need you. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience and that flexibility.
Absolutely.
Not wearing black corporate suits, the fur doesn't show up quite as much now.
Brilliant. And just like you said there, when you've been working from home for the last few years, and obviously every now and then visiting also clients, but especially it's lovely to be in a position with your own business, to decide your own lifestyle and build it around your business and around what you want really to do. And isn't it lovely now you've been able to gather a real herd for sure. So that's great. That's great. So right, so just you mentioned earlier on, and I would really love to hear a couple of more things on that. You said about reprogramming your mind, and you already mentioned a couple of things there, kind of breaking away from certain maybe limitations, reprogramming the brain, just like as if it was a computer. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? What do you mean by that, and how? Maybe a couple of steps. How is that even done?
Okay, so our brain by design is actually negatively biased. It's developed that way because it's there. The prime purpose of our brain is to keep us safe and well. So it's negatively biased. It's risk adverse. It will keep us in our comfort zone. And because of the way it works, it basically means that all the experiences you've had, it stores them, but it will recall the negative ones more frequently than the positive. And it's said in terms of research that for every negative event, so maybe you have a bad meeting, a bad presentation at work, and oh my goodness, I can't do this, I can't do that, you develop a limiting belief. And the natural bias is such that for you to negate that one event, you need 9 positive events, similar events, to get you back to the balance. So you could have had 8 brilliant presentations, and you do that next one, and that's all gone, just wiped out. So it's very much around understanding how it's built and how very simply we can go back and say, well, how would you change that bias? So there are simple techniques where I'll ask you to over recall all the positive things you've done. So it's like a fuel tank. I've got all this negative stuff, so let's just fill it with positive stuff. How you respond differently to moments in the here and now. So you flip the switch, as I say to my clients. So you see the positive. You talk in the positive. Things are less good. So it's just subtle things on how you program and use language and techniques to overcome that bias. And if you have got an abundance of unfortunate experiences and you've accumulated those negative emotions, we delete them. We literally use programming language to go and delete them, free up all the neurons in your brain so they're re-energized to reform pathways and new ways of thinking. And all the techniques I use are very simple, they work, proven to work. My clients take them away with them, so they have like a toolkit that they carry on using. And I love learning more about it. So I've invested a lot of time in doing additional qualifications and learning about the neuroscience. So I spend a lot of time with the, academies across the world. Not very good for my sleep pattern, to actually introduce different techniques into what I do.
That's amazing. Could you give a bit of more information about what kinds of courses and qualifications? Because that's really fascinating. And because I love the fact that you're using different types of tools and people can literally self-coach afterwards, isn't it? So what types of different qualifications and areas are those?
So I started the journey by doing NLP, because that's effectively the language of the brain. So I am a master practitioner of NLP and timeline. But after that, within NLP, as with lots of coaching modalities, you are trained and coached to follow a process. And someone once said to me, you don't need to know how or why it works. Well, I'm an engineer by training. And that's not what you say to an engineer, because it's like I'd like to know. So that's why I explored the idea of not just the sort of the psychology, but also the science of the brain. So I spent some time working with people out in Harvard in terms of the brain by design. I've worked with an amazing neuroscientist who works out of America, who runs an amazing coaching academy on neurocoaching. And I've also just finished some work with the Academy of Neuroscience in Australia, which again specifically looking at neuroscience for coaching. So that's currently, I've got a few things planned for next year, but it is around just exploring the science and therefore the tasks and techniques I can use based on that.
Wow, that is really exciting what you're doing and really specializing in that area even more. And I think what you said there is such a key thing. And I'd be curious to hear, is it that a certain positive change or realizations can happen quite quickly? Because sometimes people find themselves, me and you, everybody in their lives at certain points in time can find themselves at a low point, almost like there's no way out, feeling really negative, feeling really stuck, feeling really overwhelmed by responsibilities, especially where, talking about leaders, people that you especially work with and collaborate with have lots of responsibilities and pressure. And sometimes that can be a lonely road as well, not being able to share, having to put a face on sometimes as well. I'm sure for so many leaders, especially at high up corporate positions, there can be so much pressure. So is it possible to create quite quick change in someone rather than it being such a long journey? Because you mentioned about timeline therapy as well. What is that? What is timeline therapy? I'm sure many will be interested in knowing more.
So where do I start? So in terms of the programs, you can instigate change at the level in terms of the brain actually very quickly. So there's some of the techniques. So if you look at, I use hypnosis as well, because that's a way in which you can access parts of the brain quickly, effectively, to instill a level of change. So it's very much dependent on what you're working with on your client. So it can be fairly short. If someone comes with a phobia, an anxiety about an event, then you can work very quickly using the techniques to deal with that symptom and root cause. But I specifically work on programs, so 6 weeks or 12-week programs, or even year programs, where I actually work with people to go through breakthroughs. So we actually look at all of the underlying root causes to eliminate any of their limiting decisions in all areas of their life. And then when we've done that, we can choose the strategies or the programs to reload on the computer to deliver the goals they want. So it is very much around deletion, new operating systems, and then programming for the future. But that's different for every client. Absolutely. But the actual fundamental changes to remove the limiting beliefs and to get rid of some of the underlying negative emotions is very quick. When I went through the techniques myself, I had 55 years of stuff that I'd accumulated, less good stuff. We all have histories. I went through a series of timeline therapy where you actually go through using a specific technique to access the right part of the brain in a way to delete and reload. And I went through the 5 main emotions, and it was like a absolute, I don't know, people could see the difference within 48 hours. I looked taller because I used to cower down. I was quite a wallflower, would sit at the back and be very quiet, very little grey cloud. I was a grumpy grey cloud wallflower at the back. But it was like a real slap when it literally went through, it was just released. So to have that experience and to grow on that, I knew that it was something I wanted to explore. So to answer your question, the actual techniques can be very quick. It's then how you build on those. And timeline is a specific technique where you can use the imagination to access and program parts of the brain.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I could listen to that forever. I love so much anything related to the brain, our potential, how to unlock our potential. Because so many people, especially leaders, they are now in that position of not just unlocking their potential, but also looking after customers and their team. So that is such a challenge sometimes to really be in the middle of all of that. And especially at times that we are perhaps living right now. I mean, there has always been change. Change is always forever, happening. However, especially recently, leaders especially need to really adjust themselves quickly to be able not just to manage other people, but also others. Themselves, but also others and the customer experience as well. So I'd be interested in hearing just a couple of things about how to empower a team. You mentioned there that now, especially in what you do, helping people to maybe break from those limiting beliefs that you mentioned about and things that may be really pulling them back. How could leaders really step up their game, so to say, and really start to empower their team in different ways than just the same old? Because some people, they don't know where to start, not sure where to start. And are they going to put their kind of face out there on the line, trying to make a change? What are the kind of couple of things that they could do to help to empower their team or individuals in it? Any kind of strategies or tips could be great.
So I've just noted down, I think, a few of my favourites.
Yes.
And the first thing to recognise is that all of us have our own values. And our values are a bit like a moral compass. They're the values that keep us true to ourselves. They evolve over time, but they're formulated, before we're the age of 7, and we grow with those, and they're our signposts. Our behaviours hang off them, and they're very, they're instrumental to who we are. We all have different values, and when you're in a role or a team or an organisation, when those values don't align and you don't recognise the misalignment and try an alignment, you can actually cause a lot of, dissatisfaction, low spirits, low motivation. Values, they're what we're motivated towards. So if you can recognise what's important to your teams, their values, and use that to motivate them, then it's just a natural mechanism, because that's what drives you forward. But if their values don't align, it's understanding how that can manifest at work. I know that myself and lots of people, we wear a mask in certain roles because we're not truly aligned to some of the values of an organisation or a team. And that's okay, providing you can release that and recognise I have a mask and work values, but these are my values. But sometimes there is so much of a conflict that you do start seeing, the drop of performance, lack of motivation, disrespect. So all I would say is recognise people's values and work with them, which leads me to my next point, which is around boundaries. Our values help us to define boundaries around how we work. A simple one is the boundary between work and home. So is it acceptable to continually ask people to work excessive hours? Not just once in a while, but all the time. Do you respect people when they say, I can't do it this evening, I have commitments, but I can do it tomorrow? are you the type of leader that is, no, I'm not interested in your boundaries, your values, you do it now. And they're the sorts of things where we all need leaders, team players, everybody needs boundaries to be able to minimize the sense of overwhelm or stress. But importantly, as a leader, you need to understand that when you keep stepping over people's boundaries, you're crossing their values. But what you're actually saying is, I don't care enough about you and your values to respect it. So I don't care what you want. So if you replay sometimes those continual questions and why people might say, not tonight, or is there a different option? And what signals it's sending to your teams when you're continually pushing their boundaries. And the final one for teams as well is research shows that actually in times of uncertainty, and perhaps now more so than ever, when people are working at home, and people feel more motivated and satisfied at work when they are either able to control how they achieve their goals. So if you've got people working from home and you empower them, as long as they achieve what they're asked to do, how they do it and you respect them, that actually helps them deal with the uncertainty around what's going on. And if it's not the case that they can control how they deliver the goals, do they have the right mindset and the tools to be able to deal with that? So you're either the sort of person who, is it going to be able to cope with that uncertainty and has got the skills to actually think, well, I'll just get on with not knowing. But most people like to be the other side, would much rather have control over their goals, and that helps them deal with the uncertainty rather than the prescription. We all like to control what we can control.
I think thank you so much for sharing those. That's really great. And I love what you said there about the boundaries as well. And especially respecting people and what they need and what their particular desires and values are. So speaking in their language, especially what you mentioned there about NLP, how can you speak to people in their kind of language and in an empowering way so that you get the best out of them, rather than, especially there can be a lot of stressful times that leaders are experiencing. And when people are under stress, obviously they don't behave in the most constructive ways. So it can be, and stress is also sometimes being a bit self-centered. So it's actually not focusing necessarily on what other people are doing, how they are feeling. So sometimes just that quick shift and actually seeing how leaders can leverage their team and build on their team strengths, because there's so much potential in every single person. And actually, so many times leaders, just like our parents and teachers at the early years of our lives, they are the ones that we look up to and need that encouragement and support from. And people do sense true integrity and respect.
Yes.
And I think that is one of the key values that everybody holds important is probably respect and honesty. And I can see that you are definitely someone who is passing that knowledge from the years that you've had, obviously, in those leadership positions to really help leaders now to perform and succeed in their roles. So what is it that you think, especially having now worked in and collaborating on many different types of projects, and it's really exciting to hear what you're doing, what do you think you enjoy the most about your job? And probably there's quite a few, but what are the sorts of things that you enjoy the most?
No, that's really simple, actually.
Oh, okay, good.
It is. So when I left the corporate and was going through this, well, who am I question, and I realised that for many years, if someone asked me what my purpose was, I'd probably tell you the first 2 lines of my job description. That was my purpose. But actually, in terms of my purpose, so the thing I love about my job is that I can live my purpose every hour, every day, because my purpose is to go to bed every night fulfilled, knowing that I've made a difference to everybody that I've connected with that day, in whatever form. And because of that, I love everything I do, whether it's coaching directly, networking, putting posts out, learning, because it all makes a difference.
I love that. I absolutely love that, and it really is an empowering thing, and it's quite a mindset shift as well when you starting out. And although I know that you loved also your role in the corporate leadership position, and clearly very, very successful, but when you actually step into that role and actually your own business, and can really truly have limitless potential and creativity, it's quite an empowering feeling, and a lot of people can try to make that transition. So, just a couple of tips. I'm not sure, everybody's on this entrepreneurial journey. It's very, very different for everyone, isn't it? But I'm sure it's been quite a transformational journey for you, especially what you mentioned there about purpose. So in terms of maybe for someone who is starting out, or especially no matter what position we are in the business journey, there's always something to learn, always something new to do. But especially right now, someone building their dream, building their business, finding their purpose, would you have any kind of specific tips or ideas or strategies to give them so that they can really stay focused? Because focus is really the key, not trying to do everything and anything, but what could they leave, our conversation with today, with really some concrete tools to make it happen, basically?
So the first thing is sort of starts on where you ended. The tips would be, the first thing is you need to have a purpose. You need to recognize what you've learned, the strengths you have from the past, but let go of any of the doubts or the negativity around it. And if people want to find out, I write posts prolifically on LinkedIn and Facebook, and there's blogs on my website and some sheets, because I openly share the techniques that people can use outside of a coaching program to give them, the sort of the stepping stones and some sort of ideas. So for the first one for me is, you need to have a purpose. You don't need to know how you're going to get there, but you have to have a purpose that really motivates and drives your passion. If you don't have a passion for it, it's going to be a passing interest. So the first thing is, have a purpose. And then when you've got a purpose, then start looking at what that means to you in terms of your personal goals. And again, don't worry about the how, but you really need to know what success means to you. And I don't mean success just in pounds and pence, but how do you want to run your life? How many hours? Where do you want to be? Who with? Make it rich in terms of what success can really mean. And then when you've got that, you can start chunking down to the goals and the deliverables, but have a purpose. My next thing for people who are, these are all relevant because I have been there, is there is no golden nugget. So when you are there, you run the risk of it becoming an expensive hobby, because you're always looking for the next online promise, the next course to make my 6-figure business, the next webinar, because you're still carrying those doubts about what you're going to do. There's no golden nugget. You are who you are. You are unique in terms of your services and your products. So if you keep investing in time and money in these nuggets, it's an expensive hobby. You're not turning it into a business. So just be mindful. If you're not actually, you need to go on your bike and go and cycle. Yes, these things are useful, but yes, I do a lot of training in terms of that, but that's to fulfill a purpose. I still coach. It hasn't stopped me coaching. And the other thing which I learned probably about 6 months into the business is, I know my strengths, and boy, do I know my weaknesses. But you can too often try to teach an old dog new tricks, especially in terms of setting up a business. But you can, and I did. I wasted so much time and money by trying to show myself and train myself and go on webinars and courses to do things. And I had a bit of an aha moment when I thought, actually, if I focus on what I do best and change my business model so that I outsource the things that are not my forte, people who are much better at that can do that, and I can invest what I want to do, which is my coaching. And so that made a big difference in terms of my time. So at the beginning you think, oh, expense, but if you actually look at time, effort and money and actually balance it up, it's far better to focus on what you can do and outsource to those who do it better than you can. But that comes, lots of people find that quite difficult, but I learned the hard way. But when I did it, it just makes such a difference, because I can do what I can do and I know I've got the best people doing the other stuff.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I absolutely agree. And I was very much like that as well. And I think entrepreneurs have this syndrome a little bit of, I'll do it myself, I'll figure it out. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the strengths of being an entrepreneur, being resourceful, wanting to learn, wanting to be creative and kind of cracking on with things. But at the same time, so many people doing it. Like, I spent tremendous amount of time on my website. Like, a lot of people, they think, okay, first thing I should do is build a website or something similar, and then spend months on end trying to figure out how it works, actually without understanding what they're even selling, what they stand for, what their purpose is, how much money do they need to make, how to actually make that money. So really, and there's a great saying, I heard this quote a few years ago, and it made a great difference in me. It goes that weak and scattered thoughts are weak and scattered forces. So weak and scattered thoughts are weak and scattered forces. So it's for sure is that when the focus is very scattered, people are not quite sure what their purpose is. And this is normal. Shouldn't feel bad that you don't know what your purpose is, because nobody teaches entrepreneurship or leadership at school. So when we are growing as children, as teenagers, entrepreneurship, leadership isn't exactly being enforced or encouraged as such. You have rather the mindset or the conditioning of to be a very good employee, which is great. It's all very, very important. But then when you step into these leadership roles, it can be such a mountain to climb sometimes. So maybe before we finish off for today, and thank you so much for taking this time, Jane, to be with us today, maybe to share maybe two things. What has been your greatest challenge and how did you overcome it? And then maybe we'll also hear what has been your greatest success. And you obviously mentioned a couple of things that you really enjoy about, but maybe what was there really such a great success that you truly enjoyed throughout this journey until so far coming into your business?
The biggest challenge has been maintaining the motivation and the energy on your less good days. And for me, the less good days, the past few months have been different. And the drumbeat of clients, I think when you start, whether it's a service or products, you put a lot in to development, design, all the concepts. And then when you get clients, it's understanding and maintaining a drumbeat while you're actually providing a service or the products. So the biggest challenge I think I've faced is, and there have been occasions where I sort of had a peak, been really good, and then for whatever reasons there's been that downturn in terms of that drumbeat of clients. And so you develop processes in terms of how you maintain interest, and how I've got my little pools of people who are interested, and I'm feeding them all this information, and when the hook comes with the right piece of bait and they're ready, they'll be a client. I've done all of that, but it's still challenging when there are so many things going on that impact on that. So the hardest challenge has been, showing up consistently, positively, when you haven't necessarily got that drumbeat of clients for me that I wanted. So that's been the biggest challenge. So in terms of successes, so because of what I do, every client is a success. Every step they take fuels me in terms of that great moment. But I've got a few that perhaps people won't understand, will find them interesting in why I say they're successes. But so I had a client who's very, very successful entrepreneur, has many businesses, and he approached me. It was recommended to me because he'd got to a point where his behaviours were worrying him. I wasn't told explicitly, I was just told in firm that he was angry about things. And so when he came to work with me, and he was feeling angry with very many aspects around his businesses and was giving short change to people within his companies. And when I said to him, what's your success? How will you know we've been successful? His first comment he made was, I'll stop hitting people. Because his anger had actually, the aggression, he was actually physically hitting people.
Wow.
And so there was no control. So it's quite, you know, that's different. So we progressed, and yes, after the first few sessions, he'd stopped hitting people. We then reflected on what, you know, the next level, and he said, I don't want to hit people. So we'd gone from not doing it, but he still had this desire on occasions. And so we progressed from that we didn't want to hit people. And then one time he pinged me and he said, you'd be really proud of me, because I've just had this situation where historically I would have done something physical, but I haven't done it. So we'd gone from someone whose ways of dealing with what was going on was physical, to the point where he didn't want to feel it. So we moved through that to a stage now where he, as well as being an entrepreneur, has just finished loads of training and courses because he wants to counsel and coach young men, because he recognises where his aggression has built from and some of the decisions he made as a young man. So he now has used what I've done with him so he can make a difference to other people.
What an amazing thing.
And that's not something I expected, because lots of people, when they show as a successful this, successful that, you don't understand the history. So that's probably one of the most amazing ones, to go from that transformation in him. But it's the ripples. As I want to make a difference. So if I drop in the sea, I make one ripple, but if that ripple impacts on that gentleman and he ripples and affects other people, I can create waves of change.
Wow, that is very, very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I literally had goosebumps when you said, you know, and what he is now doing. And that is so courageous, because this is such a huge area where there is so much demand in that, and expressing emotion constructively, and that everybody has emotions, men and women, just as much. It's about understanding and dealing with those emotions. And it's fantastic that you have had such strategic and profound approach that he can go and duplicate that. And that's really empowering, because, and that's what I love about what you do as well, and what your programs and your whole approach and tools. It's not just about your programs, but the tools that you give, they are something that people can use, not just with you, but actually that they don't necessarily need you all the time, that they can actually start to coach themselves and even pass that skill forward to others. So that's, thank you so much for doing that work, Jane, because it's very, very important. Clearly, you're even starting your own movements now. You know, people are starting their own movements because of your work. So that's fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so on that note as well, if someone did want to start with you or have a look at something that you could provide, or you have a website where people could find some more information. There's a couple of blogs as well, as I understand.
Hooper.co.uk. So you'll see there about my programs, why I'm doing it. There's worksheets and blogs and how to contact me there as well. I'm on, it's exactly the same in terms of Facebook and LinkedIn, and I post regularly in terms of tips and techniques, and access my blogs, and always want to discuss with people how it can help them. So that's me and how to contact me.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. And really, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I've learned so much as well. And I'm definitely going to catch up with you separately on that reprogramming your mind, because I'm always interested in fascinating things like that and learning more tools. I'm going to keep an eye on your vlogs as well. You've got a whole range of series, video series coming out as well. You're doing a lot of exciting collaboration with universities, companies all over the world. So really exciting times. for the Hooper coaching business. So thank you so much again, Jane, for taking part in leading conversations, and I'll speak to you again.
My pleasure, Suzanne, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.